And from her own five-star hotel, yes, you heard that right. Fresh off a powerful keynote on equity, Dr. Amara Ngozi is stopped cold by security in the gleaming Chicago lobby. Staff elevators are in the back, they sneer, dismissing her owner's keycard like it's lost property. As whispers and shocked stares ripple through the crowd, witness the raw injustice and simmering fury that spark a viral confrontation and ignite a movement. Stay tuned, this is just the beginning. The city of Chicago exhaled a damp, metallic breath as evening descended, painting the bruised purple sky with streaks of neon and the dying embers of the sunset. Streetlights cast long, skeletal shadows across the wet pavement, reflecting in the mirrored facades of downtown skyscrapers. Inside the Viridian Hotel, however, the world was hermetically sealed, buffered from the grit and pulse of the city. Here, the air itself felt curated, a hushed blend of expensive perfume, faint floral arrangements, orchids, white lilies, nothing too ostentatious, and the subtle, almost subliminal scent of old money. Marble floors, polished to a blinding sheen, stretched across the lobby like frozen milk swirled with veins of expensive gray storm clouds. They reflected the recessed lighting, strategically placed to highlight the subtle shimmer of gold leaf detailing on the soaring ceiling cornices and the imposing, almost intimidatingly grand Art Deco elevator doors. Plush velvet armchairs in muted jewel tones were arranged in conversational islands on thick, sound-absorbing rugs. Everything whispered wealth, exclusivity, and an effortless, unshakable sense of belonging for those who were meant to belong. It was a stage set for power, designed to soothe the affluent, assure the influential, and gently, implicitly remind others of their place. Dr. Amara Ngozi moved across this opulent stage, the rhythmic, authoritative click of her Manolo Blahnik heels a sharp counterpoint to the lobby's cathedral-like quiet. She walked with purpose, her posture erect, shoulders back, carrying the residual energy of the keynote address she delivered less than an hour ago. Standing before hundreds at the McCormick Place Convention Center, she had spoken with fire and precision about economic equity, about dismantling the invisible architectures of systemic disadvantage. Her voice ringing with the conviction born of both lived experience and rigorous academic study. The applause still echoed faintly in her ears, a stark contrast to the heavy silence that seemed to follow her steps here, in the space she now owned. The dissonance was a familiar companion, championing the cause of the marginalized while navigating, operating, and profiting from spaces historically built on their exclusion. It was the central, complex tension of her life. A tightrope walk over a chasm of contradictions she navigated daily. Her suit, a bespoke creation in a deep sapphire wool crepe that whispered quiet authority, should have been armor enough. Her briefcase, containing market analyses and architectural blueprints for the hotel's extensive renovations, should have signaled her purpose. She was here not as a guest seeking accommodation, but as the owner, the driving force, come to inspect the progress on the new spa wing, the rooftop garden bar designed by a brilliant young architect she'd personally headhunted from Howard University. The tech upgrades she'd insisted upon to keep the Viridian competitive. This wasn't just real estate, it was rapidly becoming her manifesto rendered in steel, glass, and five-star service. Yet, as she approached the main elevator bank, the one designated for guests heading to the suites and the exclusive penthouse levels where her own office resided, she felt it. That familiar prickle on the back of her neck, the tightening in her gut. It was a sixth sense, honed over decades of being the unexpected variable in predictable equations, the dark face in overwhelmingly white spaces. The hyper-awareness that her very presence, despite the degrees, the accolades, the undeniable success, often registered first as an anomaly, a potential disruption to the established order. A figure stepped forward, deliberately intercepting her path, just as she reached out to press the gleaming brass call button. He was young, early 30s perhaps, with the ramrod posture and clipped movements of someone steeped in disciplined military perhaps or law enforcement. His security guard uniform was crisp, pressed to sharp creases, the golden Viridian crest embroidered precisely over his left breast pocket. His name tag read Marcus Jenkins. His eyes, a startlingly pale blue, performed a swift, dismissive scan. Her dark skin, her intricate braids swept up into a sophisticated chignon, lingered for a moment on the expensive fabric of her suit, and then settled into a look of bland, professional obstruction. "Ma'am," he said. The word was polite, yet carried the unmistakable weight of correction, of redirection. His tone was level, practiced, the kind used to manage situations, not welcome individuals. The staff elevators are located in the rear service corridor. Through those double doors, just past reception. He gestured vaguely with his chin towards an unobtrusive, unmarked door tucked away near the concierge desk, a portal designed to keep the machinery of luxury invisible. Amara's breath caught, sharp and sudden, in her throat. A familiar coldness spread through her chest, unwelcome as a winter draft. This again. The casual assumption. The immediate categorization. The swift redirection based on, what? The immutable fact of her blackness? The failure to fit neatly into his mental Rolodex of guest or owner. It was 2024. Chicago. Her hotel. And still, the default assumption was that she belonged behind the scenes, servicing the needs of others, not commanding the space herself. The sheer, bone-deep weariness of it threatened, just for a second, to make her stumble. She kept her voice low, measured, drawing on years of practice in boardrooms where her presence was tolerated more than welcomed. "Thank you, officer, but I'm not staff. I'm going up to the penthouse." Jenkins's stance remained rigid. No flicker of reconsideration crossed his face. If anything, his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He seemed to process her correction not as information but as a challenge to his authority, a deviation from the expected script. "Access to the penthouse floors is restricted, ma'am," he reiterated, his voice hardening slightly. "Registered guests and authorized personnel only." His gaze was steady, unwavering, the look of a man performing a duty he believed to be both necessary and correct. Amara suppressed a sigh that felt heavy enough to sink her through the marble floor. This exhausting dance of proving her right to exist in spaces she rightfully occupied. She placed her briefcase on the floor beside her, the soft click of the latches unnaturally loud in the charged silence. From within, she retrieved her owner's keycard. It wasn't flimsy plastic. It was substantial, cool black metal, embedded with the advanced chip that granted her access to every single door, every restricted area, every operational system within the Viridian's walls. She held it up, displaying it clearly, not brandishing it, but presenting it as definitive proof. This should clarify things. He glanced at the card, a brief, cursory look that registered nothing. His expression remained unchanged, unimpressed. He didn't reach for it, didn't ask to examine it more closely. He dismissed it with a slight shake of his head, his tone shifting now to one of weary patience, the kind reserved for dealing with someone confused, possibly dishonest, or simply not understanding the rules. "Ma'am, if you happen to find a lost keycard, the lost and found is handled by the concierge desk right over there." He pointed again, more emphatically this time, towards the gleaming mahogany counter where a smiling concierge was attending to a white couple dripping in understated luxury. A wave of heat washed over Amara's face. Humiliation, sharp and stinging, pricked behind her eyelids. It was swiftly followed by a surge of incandescent anger, so potent it made the hand holding the keycard tremble slightly. She curled her fingers around the cool metal, grounding herself against the rising tide of indignation. The carefully curated quiet of the lobby seemed to hold its breath. Conversations faltered. A few guests, lounging on velvet settees, lowered their copies of the Wall Street Journal. The couple at the concierge desk turned, their expressions shifting from polite curiosity to overt interest. Indistinct whispers began to circulate, insidious and invasive like tendrils of smoke, arguing with security. "Must be some kind of mistake. Maybe she doesn't understand." Causing a scene. Each whispered phrase felt like a tiny, poison dart finding its mark. Years of relentless work, the Harvard MBA, the multimillion-dollar acquisitions, the philanthropic initiatives she spearheaded, all rendered invisible in this single, degrading moment. She was reduced to a spectacle. A black woman being publicly challenged, questioned, implicitly accused, in the very heart of the empire she had fought so hard to build and was now striving to reshape. Her composure, the meticulously constructed shield she wore in the face of constant scrutiny, finally fractured. The practiced modulation, the careful control, they evaporated. When she spoke again, her voice sliced through the lobby's hushed reverence like a shard of ice. It was sharp, clear, and resonated with an authority that had nothing to do with politeness. "I am Dr. Amara Ngozi," she stated, each word precise, deliberate. "I own this hotel. This entire hotel chain, in fact. Your lost and found keycard happens to be my master access credential. Now, I will ask you one more time, either you step aside and allow me to proceed to my office or you will call your manager. Immediately, Jenkins blinked, visibly taken aback by the sudden shift in her demeanor, the undeniable steel in her voice, the sheer audacity of her claim. But years of ingrained procedure, the rigid framework of his training, or perhaps the deeper, more insidious training of societal bias, held him captive. He squared his shoulders, falling back on the familiar bulwark of protocol. "Ma'am, with all due respect, I'm just doing my job. I need to verify." "Verify what exactly?" Amara interrupted, her voice rising now, fueled by righteous fury. "Verify that a woman who looks like me could possibly be standing here as the owner? Verify that success isn't exclusively reserved for people who look like you? What specific protocol dictates that you dismiss incontrovertible proof when it's presented by someone whose face doesn't fit your preconceived notion of power? Call your manager." Now, the final word hung in the air, vibrating with challenge and command. The guard, Marcus Jenkins, hesitated, his certainty finally visibly faltering. He looked from Amara's blazing eyes to the growing number of curious, staring faces among the clientele, a mottled flush creeping up his neck from beneath his crisp white collar. His hand, slightly unsteady now, reached for the radio clip to his shoulder epaulette. The opulent tranquility of the Viridian lobby felt suddenly thin, brittle, a gilded cage momentarily revealing the bars of prejudice beneath. And Dr. Amara Ngozi, owner and unwelcome guest, stood her ground, the clicking of her expensive heels silenced, replaced by the heavy, suffocating weight of an injustice served up in her own damn house. The scent Amara Ngozi associated with aspiration wasn't white tea and orchids. It was the acrid tang of industrial decline mingling with the hopeful aroma of her mother's egusi soup simmering on the stove. Detroit in the late 80s and early 90s wasn't a blank canvas for urban renewal. It was a city wounded, bearing the visible scars of divestment, white flight, and the slow, agonizing collapse of the auto industry that had once been its lifeblood. Her parents, Adebola and Funk Ngozi, had arrived from Lagos full of fervor, clutching engineering degrees and the brightly colored, deceptively sturdy luggage of the Nigerian middle class, chasing the shimmering, potent myth of the American dream. What they found was different. Engineering jobs for immigrants, even highly qualified ones, were scarce, often blocked by subtle xenophobia or overt credentialism. Adebola, her father, a proud man with gentle eyes and hands surprisingly adept at fixing anything, eventually swallowed his pride and took work on the assembly line at Ford's River Rouge plant. He worked grueling double shifts until the inevitable layoffs came, then cycled through a series of low-wage jobs, security guard, janitor, driving a battered taxi through the city's crumbling streets, his quiet dignity fraying slightly with each demotion. Funk, her mother, a woman whose intelligence shone even through her exhaustion, put her own aspirations aside and cleaned houses in Bloomfield Hills and Grosse Pointe. Leafy enclaves of staggering wealth that seemed like another universe compared to their cramped apartment off 7 Mile Road. Amara remembered her mother returning late, smelling faintly of lemon polish and fatigue, sometimes bringing home discarded copies of Architectural Digest or Town and Country. Amara would pore over the glossy pages, not with envy, but with a fierce, burgeoning determination. This world of effortless comfort and assumed privilege, she wouldn't just visit it, she would master it. She wasn't merely smart, Amara possessed a ferocious intellect fueled by a simmering rage against the limitations she saw closing in around her community, her family, herself. The neighborhood library became her sanctuary, books her escape pods and her weapons. She devoured Baldwin, Morrison, Soyinka alongside economics textbooks and biographies of business titans. She debated teachers, challenged assumptions, her hunger for knowledge inextricably linked to a burning need to defy the low expectations whispered in the hallways of her underfunded public school. The blight wasn't just the boarded-up houses and cracked sidewalks, it was a poverty of aspiration, a systemic strangling of potential. Amara refused to suffocate. Academic scholarships were her lifeline, pulling her out of the undertow. First, the University of Michigan, where she excelled but always felt slightly out of sync with the prevailing campus culture. Then, against staggering odds, admission to Harvard Business School. HBS was immersion in an alien ecosystem. The inherited wealth, the casual networking that opened doors bolted shut to others, the unquestioned entitlement, it was both dazzling and deeply unsettling. She was often the only black person, almost always the only black woman, in her classes and study groups. The air crackled with microaggressions, subtle but constant reminders of her otherness, surprise at her articulate contributions, you speak so well, probing questions about her disadvantaged background, assumptions that affirmative action, not merit, was the key to her presence in those hallowed halls. She learned to compartmentalize the hurt, to transform the bitterness into fuel for late-night study sessions, for crafting arguments so airtight they couldn't be dismissed. She learned the coded language of power, finance, and strategic maneuvering, adding it layer by layer to her formidable intellectual armor. It was during a prestigious, highly competitive summer internship, one secured through a diversity recruitment program she simultaneously resented for its necessity and grasped for its opportunity, that her trajectory shifted irrevocably. She met Ms. Eleanor Hart. Eleanor, then approaching 70, was a titan, a near-mythical figure in the hospitality industry. A Jewish widow from New York, sharp-featured, perpetually adorned in impeccably tailored suits and statement jewelry, she had inherited a single, rather unremarkable hotel from her late husband decades earlier and, through sheer grit, business acumen, and an uncanny understanding of luxury, built it into Hart Hotels, a small but immensely respected chain of boutique properties. She possessed eyes that could dissect a balance sheet or a person's character with equal acuity, and a voice, raspy from decades of unfiltered cigarettes and even more unfiltered opinions, that could make seasoned executives quail. Eleanor, an outsider herself in the male-dominated world of post-war business, saw something in the fiercely intelligent, intensely focused young black woman from Detroit. Perhaps it was a reflection of her own battles, a kindred spirit cloaked in different skin. She took Amara under her wing, becoming a mentor who was less nurturing godmother and more demanding drill sergeant. "Don't ever let these mediocrities see you doubt yourself, Ngozi," Eleanor would bark, jabbing a lacquered fingernail at a flawed projection in Amara's presentation. "They expect gratitude because they let you in the room? Nonsense. You kick the door down. You own the room. Then you redesign the damn furniture because it was probably uncomfortable and designed by committee anyway." Eleanor taught Amara the soul of the business beyond the spreadsheets and profit margins. The tactile poetry of high-thread count linens, the psychological impact of lighting, the critical importance of remembering a guest's preferred newspaper. But more profoundly, she imparted lessons on the dignity of labor, the art of anticipating needs before they were spoken, the subtle alchemy required to transform brick and mortar into an experience, a haven. She dragged Amara to construction sites in muddy boots, included her in high-stakes negotiations with bankers and union bosses, and threw her headfirst into managing crises at underperforming properties. Amara didn't just survive, she soared. Yet, the headwinds Eleanor had warned her about were persistent. As she climbed the corporate ladder at Hart Hotels post-graduation, the skepticism remained, often veiled but palpable. Investors would praise her work, then ask probing questions about her management style that they never asked her white male counterparts. Board members listened politely to her innovative ideas, focusing on sustainability, experiential travel, community partnerships, then reverted to safer, more traditional strategies. The insidious whisper of diversity hire clung to her like cheap perfume, an attempt to footnote her achievements, to imply her presence was about optics rather than P&L impact. She countered with relentless preparation, undeniable results, and a cool professionalism that bordered on impenetrable, but the constant need to outperform, to preemptively dismantle doubt, was exhausting. Eleanor, whose health was beginning a slow, graceful decline, watched Amara's ascent with a fierce, almost maternal pride mingled with a pragmatist's concern about the toll it was taking. One blustery autumn afternoon, in Eleanor's magnificent penthouse apartment overlooking Central Park, a space filled with challenging modern art, overflowing bookshelves, and the comforting aroma of strong coffee, she delivered the news that would rewrite Amara's future. "My nephews," Eleanor announced, her voice thinner now but still carrying its characteristic lack of sentimentality, "are well-meaning idiots. They understand balance sheets, but they don't understand value. They'd sell the soul of this company for a quick buck. So I'm not leaving it to them, Amara. It's yours." She paused, letting the weight of the statement land. All of it. The properties, the name, the headaches. But especially the Viridian. The Viridian in Chicago was Eleanor's masterpiece. The property she had lavished the most attention on, transforming it from a faded grande dame into a beacon of contemporary luxury. It was the flagship, the most profitable, the most prestigious, and in many ways the most resistant to change. Bequeathing it, the entire company, to Amara, a black woman decades younger than most industry leaders, someone whose vision often clashed with the established norms, was Eleanor's final, audacious act of defiance, a calculated disruption baked into her last will and testament. Amara was speechless. Tears, hot and unexpected, welled in her eyes, blurring the iconic Manhattan skyline outside the vast windows. It wasn't just the staggering scale of the inheritance, it was the profound trust, the validation, the weight and honor of the legacy being placed squarely on her shoulders. Eleanor waved a frail, dismissive hand adorned with formidable rings. "Oh, stop that. None of that weeping nonsense. You haven't earned it yet. Go out there and earn it, Ngozi. Take what I built and make it more. Make it better. Not just bigger or richer. Better. Your way." 6 months later, Eleanor Hart passed away peacefully in her sleep. Amara, grieving but resolute, stepped into the role of CEO of Hart Hotels. She was suddenly one of the most powerful women in hospitality and undeniably one of the very few black women occupying such a position. The responsibility felt immense, but the mandate was clear: make it better. Your way. Her way meant challenging the industry's deeply ingrained biases and narrow definitions of talent. It meant looking beyond polished resumes and traditional career paths to find excellence in unexpected places. When the Viridian's long-serving, Michelin-starred executive chef announced his retirement, the board presented Amara with a short list of predictable successors, established names from renowned restaurants in New York, Paris, London. Amara thanked them politely and hired Javi Ramirez. Javi possessed an almost preternatural talent, a palate that understood flavor combinations on an elemental level, and a passion for sustainable, locally sourced ingredients that bordered on religious fervor. His vision for Latin fusion cuisine was bold, innovative, exciting. Javi also possessed a criminal record. A felony conviction for drug trafficking stemming from a desperate, misguided period in his late teens in Pilsen had resulted in a 5-year prison sentence. He'd used the time not just for reflection but for obsessive culinary study, transforming the prison kitchen into his personal laboratory. Upon release, he'd faced rejection after rejection, his talent overshadowed by the indelible stain of his past. Amara, reviewing his application, saw not just the conviction, but the grit, the remorse, the redemption arc, and the raw, undeniable brilliance. She offered him the position of executive chef at the Viridian. The existing kitchen hierarchy was initially thrown into disarray. Whispers and anxieties about safety and reputation rippled through the staff. But Javi's quiet humility, combined with his demanding standards and the sheer artistry of his food, gradually silenced the doubters. His innovative tasting menus began generating buzz, then critical acclaim. Next, Amara tackled the crucial role of director of events. The Viridian was a coveted venue for Chicago's elite social calendar, high society weddings, political fundraisers, Fortune 500 corporate events. She interviewed a parade of impeccably credentialed candidates, all polished, professional, and largely indistinguishable. Then she met Zara. Zara was dynamic, hyper-organized, bursting with creative energy, and possessed an almost uncanny ability to anticipate logistical challenges. Her portfolio showcased flawlessly executed events of significant scale and complexity. Zara was also a transgender woman and outspoken advocate for LGBTQ+ rights within the community. Her employment history showed a pattern, glowing references followed by abrupt departures, often coinciding with her gender identity becoming more widely known within the workplace or being used as a pretext for termination based on vague notions of client comfort or brand fit. Amara recognized the pattern instantly. She saw not risk, but resilience. Not potential controversy, but exceptional competence. She hired Zara, promoting her rapidly as she consistently exceeded expectations. These hires were not met with universal acclaim within the Hart Hotels hierarchy. The board of directors, largely composed of older white men who had served under Eleanor but never fully embraced her more iconoclastic tendencies, voiced significant reservations. Their objections were couched in the familiar, coded language of corporate caution. Amara, with all due respect, Javier's background. It's highly unconventional. Harrison Croft, a portly board member with thinning hair and a penchant for risk aversion, had stated during a particularly tense meeting. Are we certain this aligns with the Viridian's 5-star image? The potential liability. Javier's talent aligns with our image, Harrison, Amara had countered, her voice dangerously smooth. His food is earning us accolades and attracting a new, discerning clientele. His past is documented, his present contribution is elevating this hotel. Isn't excellence the image we wish to project? Regarding Zara, Croft and others had been even more explicit in their discomfort. This lifestyle choice, Amara, Croft had ventured hesitantly, it's visible. It could potentially alienate some of our more traditional clientele. It might attract the wrong kind of attention. Amara's eyes had flashed, the cool professionalism momentarily giving way to barely concealed fire. The wrong kind of attention, Harrison? or simply attention that makes you uncomfortable? Some clientele might be uncomfortable with a black woman CEO. Shall we poll them on that too? We are running a business based on merit, talent, and delivering exceptional experiences. Zara is unequivocally the best person for this job. Her identity is as irrelevant to her professional capabilities as your receding hairline is to yours unless we choose to make it relevant through discriminatory practices. She had won those arguments backed by Eleanor's explicit transfer of controlling interest and her own growing track record of success. But the resistance hadn't vanished, it had merely submerged, simmering beneath the surface of polite board meetings and quarterly reports. They viewed her appointments not as strategic decisions to acquire top talent, but as exercises in social engineering, risky ventures driven by an agenda they neither fully understood nor particularly endorsed. They couldn't grasp that Amara's interpretation of Eleanor's mandate, make it better, your way, extended beyond profit margins and occupancy rates. It was about fundamentally restructuring the empire she inherited, transforming it into a place that reflected the equitable world she was fighting to build outside its walls. A world where talent wasn't filtered through the narrow mesh of prejudice. A world where everyone, from the undocumented dishwasher striving for a better life to the CEO navigating the complexities of corporate power, felt a genuine sense of belonging. A world where she, Dr. Amara Ngozi, wouldn't be stopped at the elevator of the hotel she owned simply because her face didn't fit. The air in the lobby crackled. The earlier hushed reverence replaced by a palpable, uncomfortable tension. Marcus Jenkins, the security guard, still stood as a human barrier between Amara and the elevator, his hand now resting uncertainly on his radio, his face a mixture of ingrained obstinacy and dawning confusion. The audience of onlookers had grown, their feigned indifference replaced by open gawking. Smartphones were emerging, held discreetly but purposefully angled towards the unfolding drama. Amara felt a sickening lurch in her stomach, the potent cocktail of fury and humiliation now laced with the cold dread of imminent viral exposure. This wasn't just an insult. It was rapidly becoming a public spectacle. Suddenly, a figure burst through the unmarked office door near reception, practically tripping over his own feet in his haste. Tom Cooper, the general manager of the Viridian, was usually the epitome of smooth, unflappable professionalism, a man adept at handling the eccentricities and demands of the ultra-wealthy with practiced ease. But as his eyes darted from Marcus to the small crowd and finally landed on Amara, his normally ruddy complexion turned a ghastly shade of pale, as if he'd seen a ghost wielding a corporate audit report. "Dr. Ngozi," Cooper gasped, his voice tight with panic and strained deference. He scurried across the marble expanse, smoothing his already perfect tie with trembling fingers. "My goodness. Is everything all right here?" Before Amara could articulate the sheer magnitude of what was not all right, Marcus turned to his boss, seeking justification, perhaps reinforcement. "Mr. Cooper, sir?" This lady was attempting to gain unauthorized access to the penthouse levels. She refused to use the staff elevator and she claims nothing, Marcus, Amara interjected, her voice dangerously quiet now, the earlier sharpness replaced by a chilling calm that somehow felt more threatening. She stated her identity. She presented her credentials. Credentials which you summarily dismissed. Cooper looked as though he might genuinely faint. He shot Marcus a look so loaded with fury and disbelief it could have melted steel. "Marcus," he hissed, his voice barely a whisper but carrying the force of a thunderclap, "this is Dr. Amara Ngozi. She doesn't claim anything. She owns the Viridian. She owns all of Hart hotels, you idiot." The color drained instantly from Marcus Jenkins's face, leaving it stark white against his dark uniform. His eyes widened in horror, finally flicking down to the black metal keycard still clutched tightly in Amara's hand, as if truly seeing it for the first time. He began to stammer, incoherent sounds escaping his lips before he managed, "But sir, she didn't look." He trailed off, the unspoken words, like an owner, hanging heavy and toxic in the suddenly silent lobby. "Didn't look the part." The phrase, insidious and pervasive, struck Amara with the force of a physical blow. All her achievements, her education, her relentless drive, erased by a glance, by a preconceived notion of what power and ownership were supposed to look like. White, male, older. Certainly not her. Didn't look like what, Marcus? Amara pressed, her gaze locking onto his, refusing to let him look away. Her voice was soft, almost conversational, but carried the weight of centuries of such dismissals. Like someone capable of building a business? Like someone who belongs in the front entrance instead of the service corridor? Help me understand. What, precisely, does the owner of a five-star hotel look like in your professional assessment? Marcus flinched as if struck. He couldn't meet her eyes. He stared down at his own polished shoes, a deep, painful flush creeping up his neck. I apologize, ma'am. Dr. Ngozi. I was just following protocol. Standard procedure for securing restricted access points. His voice was a low mumble, stripped of its earlier confidence. Was it standard procedure to assume my owner's master keycard was lost and found? Amara held it up again, the black metal catching the light. Was it standard procedure to direct me without question to the staff entrance? Or did your standard procedure have a built-in filter, Marcus? One triggered by the color of my skin. Cooper jumped in again, desperate to stanch the bleeding. Dr. Ngozi, please, on behalf of the entire hotel, accept my most profound apologies. This is inexcusable. A catastrophic failure in judgment. He's relatively new. There's been a terrible, terrible misunderstanding. It's not a misunderstanding, Tom, Amara stated, her voice regaining its edge, directed now at the flustered manager. It's a manifestation. A symptom of a pervasive bias that we clearly haven't eradicated. Not even here. Not even with a black woman signing the checks. The exchange, raw and charged, had not gone unrecorded. A guest, a young tech investor initially irritated by the delay, had quickly recognized the potent symbolism of the scene. His smartphone had been recording for several minutes, capturing Marcus's initial refusal, Amara's mounting frustration, Cooper's panicked arrival, and the devastating didn't-look-the-part admission. Before Amara even stepped into the finally accessible elevator, clips of the incident were already pinging across the digital stratosphere. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, the confrontation exploded. Hashtag checking injustice. Hashtag Viridian VI pornot. Hashtag Hotel While Black. Hashtag bias at the Viridian. The carefully polished image of the Viridian, a sanctuary of impeccable service and discreet luxury, shattered, replaced by the ugly reality of racial profiling caught on camera. Later that evening, the atmosphere throughout the hotel remained thick with unspoken tension. Amara, secluded in her penthouse office overlooking the glittering, indifferent city skyline, felt a profound sense of weariness settle over her anger. The smooth, silent ascent in the private elevator had felt less like a victory and more like a confirmation of the exhausting, unending nature of the fight. Downstairs, in the brightly lit, utilitarian staff cafeteria, Marcus Jenkins sat alone, pushing soggy French fries around his plate. The scene in the lobby replayed relentlessly in his mind. Dr. Ngozi's furious eyes, Mr. Cooper's apoplectic face, the sudden dawning horror of his mistake. He felt a tangled knot of shame, resentment, and profound confusion. He had been trying to do his job, hadn't he? He was an ex-Marine. Follow orders. Maintain security. Assess threats. Protect the perimeter. Situational awareness they drilled into him. Identify anomalies. But had his training, his ingrained sense of order, been warped by something deeper, something he hadn't even recognized within himself? Was she the anomaly he'd subconsciously identified? Javier Ramirez, the head chef, finished his own late meal and noticed the young guard's slumped posture. He'd heard the whispers, seen the frantic huddles among the management team. He slid onto the bench opposite Marcus, his presence calm and non-judgmental. Tough shift, Javi said quietly, his voice carrying the faintest trace of a Chicago accent beneath his precise diction. Marcus looked up, his pale blue eyes clouded with turmoil. Chef man, I screwed up. Royally. Cooper read me the riot act. Said I brought shame on the whole damn hotel. Dr. Ngozi, the way she looked at me. He shoved his tray away, his appetite gone. But I swear, chef, I was just following the training book. Secure the elevators. Verify ID. Don't let anyone unauthorized past. She didn't have a room key. Wasn't on the guest list. Javi listened patiently, letting Marcus vent his confused justifications. Then he leaned forward, his expression serious but kind. Training books are black and white, Marcus. People aren't. You saw a black woman, right? Maybe dressed sharp, but still different from who you usually see heading to the penthouse. And maybe, just maybe, your brain filled in the blanks based on that picture, not just the facts in front of you. Your protocol kicked in based on an assumption. Marcus started to protest, a flicker of his earlier defensiveness returning. No, it wasn't about race. I wouldn't you? Javi interrupted gently, holding his gaze. Be honest with yourself, man. Look, people make assumptions about me every damn day. Before Dr. Ngozi took a chance, you know what they saw? He tapped his own chest. They saw ex-con. They saw gangbanger from the old neighborhood. They saw a potential threat. They sure as hell didn't see executive chef, five-star hotel. They saw the label society slapped on me, felon, not the father trying to provide for his kids, not the guy who dreams in recipes. It's like wearing an invisible sign you didn't ask for, but everyone reads it first. He paused, letting the words sink in. Sometimes, Marcus, the uniform people react to isn't the one you're wearing. It's the one they expect you to be wearing based on your skin, your name, your past, whatever. You didn't see the owner. You saw someone who didn't fit your picture. Marcus stared at Javi, the chef's words hitting him with a force far greater than Cooper's anger or the threat of disciplinary action. He thought about the split-second judgment, the dismissal of the keycard, the immediate redirection to the staff entrance. She didn't look the part. The phrase echoed in his mind, no longer a justification but an indictment. A cold wave of genuine guilt washed over him, deeper and more unsettling than the fear of losing his job. Meanwhile, floors above, Amara was engaged in her own confrontation. An emergency virtual board meeting had been convened, the faces of the Hart Hotel's directors appearing in neat squares on the large monitor dominating her office wall. Behind her, the city lights glittered, a stunning backdrop to an ugly conversation. The viral video clip was playing on a loop on a smaller screen beside her. This incident, Amara began, her voice devoid of heat but sharp as obsidian, is not an isolated mistake made by one poorly trained employee. It is a direct, public, and deeply damaging consequence of the very culture of exclusion and implicit bias that I have been warning this board about since I took ownership. Harrison Croft's face appeared, carefully composed, attempting an expression of concerned gravitas. Amara, naturally, we are all appalled by what occurred. Truly regrettable. Mr. Cooper assures us disciplinary measures are being taken against the guard. But we must maintain perspective. Let's not allow one unfortunate encounter to overshadow the excellent work. Perspective. Amara cut him off, disbelief hardening her features. Harrison, the CEO and owner of this company, was racially profiled and denied access to her own property. It is the lead story on several national news sites. Hashtag checking injustice is trending globally. What perspective are you suggesting? That this is just the cost of doing business? That this level of systemic failure is somehow acceptable? She leaned closer to the camera, her gaze intense, addressing each board member individually. This isn't just about Marcus Jenkins. This is about the ingrained attitudes, the unexamined assumptions, the narrow definitions of professionalism and belonging that permeate this industry and, yes, this company. It's about the coded language used when discussing my risky hires, Javier and Zara. It's about the standards you gentlemen are always so keen to uphold. Her voice dropped, becoming dangerously soft. Your standards, historically, have been set by and for people who look like you. They inherently marginalize and exclude anyone who deviates from that norm. They create an environment where employees, consciously or not, feel empowered to police belonging based on skin color rather than credentials. Where a black woman holding an owner's key is treated with more suspicion than a white man in flip-flops claiming he lost his room number. Another board member, a man named Davenport, cleared his throat. Amara, we have comprehensive diversity and inclusion policies in place. Hart Hotels is committed to equality. Policies are meaningless pieces of paper if they aren't reflected in the lived reality of our employees and guests. Amara retorted, striking the desk softly with her fist for emphasis. A non-discrimination clause on our website didn't stop Marcus Jenkins from seeing me as staff. It didn't prevent this public relations disaster. Clearly, what we have in place is insufficient. I have been insufficient in forcing deeper change. She took a deep, steadying breath, the admission hanging in the air. This failure wasn't just theirs, it was hers too. She hadn't dismantled the old structures quickly or thoroughly enough. This changes. Now, she declared, her voice ringing with renewed resolve. Effective immediately, we are implementing mandatory, comprehensive, top-to-bottom bias awareness, cultural competency, and de-escalation training. Led by external experts. Not a one-time webinar, but an ongoing process integrated into our performance reviews and corporate culture. We will measure its impact. We will hold managers accountable. And participation will not be optional for anyone. A predictable wave of murmurs rose from the board members' virtual squares, concerns about cost, about operational disruption, about potential employee pushback. Amara silenced them with a look. The cost of inaction was demonstrated quite vividly in our lobby today. The disruption has already occurred globally. Our brand reputation is hemorrhaging. But more importantly, the fundamental dignity of the people who work for and stay with Hart hotels is at stake. This is not a negotiation. This is the new standard. The confrontation in the lobby had cracked the polished facade of the Viridian. Amara Ngozi was now determined to take a sledgehammer to the foundations beneath. The fight wasn't merely about getting through the door. It was about rebuilding the entire house. Amara moved with the swift, decisive energy that had propelled her from Detroit to Harvard to the CEO's office. The aftermath of the lobby incident wasn't just about damage control, it became the catalyst for a fundamental overhaul of the Viridian's internal culture. The mandatory bias training she initiated was unlike anything the hotel staff had experienced before. Forget dry PowerPoint presentations and online modules checked off with a click. Amara brought in a team of facilitators from outside the corporate world, a respected sociologist specializing in critical race theory from the University of Chicago, a psychologist expert in the mechanics of unconscious bias, and two seasoned community organizers known for their unflinching work in restorative justice on the city's South Side. The workshops were intensive, interactive, and deliberately uncomfortable. They delved into the history of systemic racism in America, the nuances of microaggressions, the concept of privilege, white privilege, male privilege, class privilege, and how these invisible forces shaped interactions, assumptions, and opportunities, even within the seemingly egalitarian space of a luxury hotel. Staff were broken into small, diverse groups, forced to confront difficult scenarios, share personal experiences, if they chose, and challenge their own ingrained perspectives. Marcus Jenkins attended the first sessions radiating sullen defiance. He hadn't been fired, a decision by Dr. Ngozi that surprised and, frankly, confused him. Instead, he was mandated to participate fully in all training modules alongside additional counseling and de-escalation retraining. He sat in the back, arms crossed, convinced he was being made an example of, scapegoated for a simple mistake amplified by social media hysteria. He listened stonily as the facilitators discussed concepts like implicit bias and intersectionality. It felt like an attack, like being blamed for societal problems he didn't create. Reverse racism, he thought, the phrase echoing the angry online comments he'd devoured, seeking validation for his bruised ego. They're making everything about race. The turning point came during a session focused on gender identity, LGBTQ+ inclusion, and the specific challenges faced by transgender individuals in the workplace. Zara, the Viridian's vibrant and increasingly lauded director of events, had agreed, after much consideration, to share part of her personal story. Standing before her colleagues, from housekeepers whose language skills were still developing, to bellhops juggling college classes, to senior managers like Tom Cooper and the still-guarded Marcus Jenkins, Zara spoke with a quiet vulnerability that belied her usual confident effervescence. She didn't recite statistics or legal precedents. She spoke about the gut-wrenching fear before coming out to her family. She described the elation of finally aligning her identity, followed by the crushing weight of workplace discrimination. The promising job interview where the manager's welcoming demeanor visibly froze the moment he reviewed her legal documents showing her former name. The snickers and deliberately misused pronouns in the break room of a previous employer. The devastating meeting where she was let go from a job she loved, told vaguely that she wasn't the right fit for the company culture shortly after she began advocating for gender-neutral restrooms. She spoke of the daily calculus of safety versus authenticity, the exhaustion of constantly educating, explaining, justifying her existence. Every single day, Zara said, her voice steady but carrying an undercurrent of emotion, I walk into this beautiful hotel and I feel immense gratitude for the chance Dr. Ngozi gave me, a chance others wouldn't. But there's always a part of me that's bracing. Bracing for the sideways glance, the whispered comment, the invasive question disguised as curiosity, the subtle signal that I don't truly belong. What happened to Dr. Ngozi in the lobby was loud and public. But bias often operates in whispers. It's the 1,000 tiny cuts that wear you down, that make you question your worth, that steal your energy. Marcus listened, initially with the same defensive detachment. But Zara's words, her raw honesty, began to penetrate his armor. He wasn't hearing abstract theory. He was hearing a colleague, someone he saw every day, recount experiences of exclusion and prejudice that felt viscerally real. He remembered Javi's words in the cafeteria, seeing the label, not the person. He realized, with a jolt of discomfort, that he'd initially seen Zara primarily through the lens of her identity, wondering about the controversy her hiring might cause. He hadn't fully seen the brilliant, dedicated professional who orchestrated flawless events under immense pressure. He looked around the room at the faces of his coworkers, Maria from housekeeping, whose perpetually worried expression hinted at struggles he couldn't fathom, old Samuel, the doorman whose quiet dignity seemed almost regal, Aisha at the front desk, whose hijab sometimes drew curious stares from guests. He started to wonder about the stories they carried, the biases they faced, the invisible hurdles they navigated just to get through a shift. The anger and resentment inside him began to recede, replaced by a nascent, unsettling flicker of empathy. It wasn't absolution, but it was a crack in the wall. The training, predictably, wasn't a panacea. Some employees remained resistant, grumbling about wokeness and sensitivity overkill in hushed tones near the time clock. The incident continued to be debated fiercely in the media. Conservative commentators lambasted the Viridian and Dr. Ngozi for prioritizing political correctness over security and common sense, framing the mandatory training as corporate indoctrination. Amara found her inbox flooded with hateful emails, some containing explicit threats. Security around her had to be discreetly increased. Yet, she refused to back down. Instead, she doubled down. Recognizing that internal change wasn't enough, she forged partnerships with community organizations and public high schools in underserved neighborhoods like Englewood and North Lawndale. The Viridian launched a comprehensive hospitality internship program, offering paid positions, rigorous training, and dedicated mentorship to teenagers who typically lacked access to the networks and opportunities that led to careers in the luxury sector. Preference was given to applicants from marginalized backgrounds, low-income youth, recent immigrants, young people of color. Excellence is distributed equally across our city, Amara stated at the program's launch event, held in the hotel's newly renovated community engagement space. Opportunity is not. We cannot claim to be part of Chicago's fabric if we only cater to the privileged few. This program is an investment in these young people, in our city's future, and in redefining what hospitality can and should be. The program faced predictable hurdles. Some longtime staff members chafed at the extra supervisory burden. Some interns struggled initially to adapt to the exacting standards and fast pace of a five-star environment. But Amara, Javi, Zara, and even Tom Cooper, who was slowly evolving under Amara's influence, committed themselves as mentors, providing patient guidance, celebrating small victories, and addressing challenges with constructive support rather than punitive measures. A few months into these new initiatives, another incident arose, testing the strength of Amara's proclaimed values. Aisha Hassan, a bright, multilingual Somali-American woman who worked the front desk, began experiencing targeted harassment from a frequent, high-spending corporate guest. It began subtly, patronizing comments about her hijab, must be hot under that thing, pointed questions about her faith, do you people really pray 5 times a day? Then it escalated. He started making demands laced with xenophobia, can I get someone who actually speaks American English, culminating one afternoon when he loudly berated her in the busy lobby, demanding she remove her headscarf because it was making him uncomfortable and questioning her loyalty to the country. Aisha, though visibly shaken, remained composed. Drawing on the recent de-escalation and anti-harassment training, she calmly but firmly informed the guest that his language and behavior were inappropriate and violated hotel policy. She stated she would not continue the check-in process while being subjected to abuse. The guest exploded, shouting threats about taking his company's considerable business elsewhere, demanding to see the manager, and causing a significant scene. Tom Cooper, alerted to the commotion, arrived to find the guest red-faced and yelling, and Aisha standing her ground, pale but resolute. Cooper's first instinct, conditioned by years of prioritizing revenue and placating powerful clients, was damage control. He privately suggested to Aisha that perhaps apologizing for the misunderstanding and offering the guest a sweet upgrade might smooth things over. He even floated the idea of scheduling Aisha for back-office tasks during this particular guest's future stays. He brought the situation to Amara, framing it as a delicate balance between employee support and significant financial risk. Amara listened stone-faced as Cooper laid out the situation and his proposed solutions. Then she asked him to bring Aisha to her office immediately. She listened again, this time to Aisha's direct account, her voice trembling slightly but her details precise and unwavering. Amara noted the way Aisha clutched the edge of her faded but clean and neatly pinned hijab as she recounted the guest's ugliest remarks. When Aisha finished, Amara met her gaze directly. There was no hesitation, no calculation of profit and loss in her eyes. Aisha, she said, her voice warm but firm, You handled that situation with remarkable professionalism and courage under extremely difficult circumstances. You upheld not only hotel policy, but basic standards of human decency. You did absolutely nothing wrong, and you have my full, unequivocal support. Thank you. Then, she turned to Cooper, her expression hardening into steel. Tom, contact Mr. Henderson immediately. Inform him that his behavior was unacceptable, discriminatory, and constitutes harassment under our explicit zero-tolerance policy. Inform him that his reservation is canceled, and he is permanently banned from the Viridian and all other Hart hotel properties worldwide. Issue a formal trespass warning. Alert corporate security at his company about his conduct if you deem it necessary. And ensure Aisha receives any support she needs, including paid time off if she requires it. Cooper's jaw dropped. Dr. Ngozi, with all due respect, Henderson's company spends upwards of $2 million a year across our properties. This could have massive financial repercussions. And what is the price of Aisha's dignity, Tom? Amara countered sharply. What is the cost of signaling to our entire staff that their safety and respect are secondary to a client's checkbook? We just invested significant resources in training everyone, including you, that this is precisely the kind of behavior we will not tolerate. That training is meaningless, a complete sham, if we buckle the first time it costs us something. Dignity isn't negotiable. Profit does not trump people here. Not on my watch. The decision sent shockwaves through the hotel staff. Fear mingled with respect. Some worried privately about potential cutbacks if the Henderson account was indeed lost. But a far larger number felt a profound sense of validation, even pride. They saw that Dr. Ngozi's pronouncements about values weren't just corporate speak. They were actionable principles, defended even when it hurt the bottom line. Aisha, though initially apprehensive about being the cause of such upheaval, felt a weight lift from her shoulders, the weight of being seen, believed, and fiercely protected by her employer. Henderson's company did, predictably, raise hell. Threats were made, contracts reviewed. The story leaked, predictably, to the press, sparking another round of polarized debate. Critics accused the Viridian of cancel culture, of sacrificing business pragmatism for woke ideology. Supporters lauded the hotel for taking a principled stand against bigotry. Amara didn't hide. She called a press conference. Standing at a podium in the Viridian's ballroom, flanked by Tom Cooper, who looked chastened but supportive, and Zara Khan, she addressed the media directly. Let me be perfectly clear, Amara began, her voice steady and unwavering. The Viridian Hotel is committed to providing exceptional luxury and service to all our guests. But our definition of luxury includes an environment of mutual respect and safety. Service does not, and never will, include tolerating abuse, harassment, or discrimination directed at our staff members. We stand firmly by our employee and by our decision to enforce a zero-tolerance policy against such behavior. There are consequences for violating the basic tenets of decency within these walls. She didn't stop there. She spoke passionately about the bias training, the internship program, her broader vision for a hospitality industry that lived up to the true meaning of the word, one that was genuinely welcoming, inclusive, and equitable for everyone, regardless of their background, identity, or position. Our values, she concluded, her gaze sweeping across the assembled reporters, are not contingent on convenience or profit margins. They are the foundation upon which we are building our future. Dignity isn't negotiable. The ripples of change set in motion by that ugly confrontation in the lobby were no longer subtle. They were becoming waves reshaping the shoreline of the Viridian, sending a clear message that a new tide had come in. Months later, the grand ballroom of the Viridian pulsed with an energy unlike any it had hosted before. Gone was the staid formality of corporate galas or the predictable pageantry of society weddings. Tonight, the room thrummed with the vibrant, infectious buzz of the inaugural Emerging Empires Gala, an event conceived, funded, and driven by Amara Ngozi herself, dedicated to celebrating and providing crucial seed capital for minority entrepreneurs from Chicago and across the Midwest. Zara Khan and her events team had transformed the opulent space. Deep, rich jewel tones replaced the usual pale neutrals. Dramatic uplighting illuminated stunning works by local black and Latinx artists hung where generic landscapes usually resided. Centerpieces featured not imported roses but striking arrangements of seasonal blooms and produce sourced from urban farms on the south and west sides. A subtle nod to Javi Ramirez's culinary philosophy and Amara's commitment to community partnerships. The guest list itself was a testament to Amara's vision. Established venture capitalists actively seeking diverse investments mingled easily with first-generation founders. City officials chatted with community activists. Seasoned executives offered advice to nervous young entrepreneurs clutching prototypes and business plans. The air crackled with innovation, ambition, and a palpable sense of shared purpose that transcended the usual hierarchies of wealth and status. Near the ballroom entrance, Marcus Jenkins stood, not in his former security uniform, but in a sharp, well-tailored dark suit. A small, discreet lapel pin identified him as part of the host team, diversity and community liaison, a role Amara had created specifically for him after witnessing his gradual but profound shift during and after the bias training. His posture retained its military discipline, but the rigid defensiveness was gone, replaced by an open, welcoming demeanor. He greeted arriving guests with genuine warmth, his smile reaching his pale, blue eyes. He answered questions, offered directions, and facilitated introductions with a quiet confidence that spoke volumes about his journey. He'd become an active participant in the hotel's outreach programs, volunteering his time with the internship program, even tentatively sharing his own experiences learning about bias in follow-up staff sessions. Amara watched him for a moment, acknowledging his nod. Redemption, she reflected, wasn't about forgetting the past or erasing the harm caused. It was about the hard, intentional work of rebuilding understanding, fostering empathy, and committing to doing better. Marcus was doing the work. Amara moved through the glittering crowd, a calm epicenter in the joyful storm. She paused to offer heartfelt congratulations to a young woman whose biotech startup aimed to address health disparities in Black communities. She shared a brief, knowing laugh with Javi, who was beaming with pride as his team served exquisite, culturally diverse hors d'oeuvres that told a story with every bite. She exchanged a look of mutual triumph with Zara, who navigated the complex logistics of the evening with seemingly effortless grace. Even the board members were present, circulating, perhaps with a slightly forced bonhomie, but undeniably there. Harrison Croft, looking trimmer and slightly less perpetually anxious, caught Amara's eye and offered a respectful, almost deferential, nod. The viral incident hadn't sunk the ship. Under Amara's steady hand and values-driven leadership, the Viridian was thriving, attracting not only positive press but also a new clientele drawn to its blend of luxury and conscience. Occupancy rates were up and the brand was developing a different kind of prestige, one built on more than just thread counts and celebrity sightings. Later in the evening, Amara took the stage. A hush fell over the ballroom, anticipation palpable. She stood for a moment, taking it all in, the sea of diverse faces, the energy of connection, the tangible hope in the room. Her team, her board, the entrepreneurs, the allies. "Good evening, everyone," she began, her voice clear and resonant, filling the large space without needing to shout. "Welcome to the Viridian. And welcome, more importantly, to a celebration of what happens when talent meets opportunity, when resilience overcomes resistance, when dreams are nurtured, not dismissed." She spoke briefly of her own journey, acknowledging her parents' sacrifices and the systemic barriers she'd faced, but quickly pivoted to the collective. She spoke about the imperative of building inclusive economies, not just as a matter of fairness, but as a catalyst for innovation and shared prosperity. She challenged the notion that meritocracy could exist in a system still riddled with bias. "My mentor, the formidable Eleanor Hart," Amara continued, her voice softening with affection and respect, "taught me everything about the mechanics of running a hotel. But her most enduring lesson was about its soul. She believed that true hospitality wasn't just about impeccable service or luxurious amenities. It was about creating a sanctuary. A place where people, all people, guests and staff alike, felt fundamentally seen, profoundly valued, and unequivocally like they belonged." She paused, allowing the weight of the word to land. "That, my friends," she declared, her gaze sweeping across the rapt audience, "is the ultimate luxury. The profound comfort of belonging." She then announced the recipients of the evening's substantial seed grants, funds she had personally solicited from corporations and foundations, leveraging her position to open doors for others. She highlighted the successes of the Viridian's internship program, gesturing towards several smiling graduates, now full-time employees in sharp uniforms, standing proudly along the side of the ballroom. And then, she unveiled her next, most ambitious project yet. "Eleanor Hart entrusted me with a powerful legacy," Amara said, her voice infused with passion. "And I believe honoring that legacy means not just polishing the crown jewels, but planting new seeds in fertile, often overlooked ground. That is why I am incredibly proud and deeply moved to announce that Hart Hotels will be breaking ground next year on a major new development. Back home, in the heart of Detroit, a collective gasp, followed by a wave of excited murmurs, swept through the room. Detroit, her roots, a city still wrestling with its past, still fighting for its future. A symbol of both American struggle and resilience. This will not be just another glass tower parachuting into the city, Amara stated firmly, anticipating the potential skepticism. This project is being designed in partnership with the community. We are committed to using union labor for construction and hotel operations. We will prioritize hiring Detroit residents, implementing robust local sourcing policies, and establishing deep partnerships with neighborhood organizations. The hotel will feature gallery space dedicated to showcasing Detroit artists, a culinary program led by local talent, and, she paused, taking a deep breath, it will be the first hotel in the Hart portfolio to launch with a comprehensive employee profit-sharing plan and a clear pathway for worker representation. We are not just building in Detroit. We are investing with Detroit, building together. The announcement detonated in the room, met with a sustained, thunderous standing ovation. The sheer audacity of it, the scale, the location, the explicit commitments to labor, community, and shared prosperity, was breathtaking. Even the board members, seated together near the front, were applauding, albeit perhaps with lingering anxieties about the financial models and the precedent being set. Amara had fought hard for this, presenting meticulous market research, community impact assessments, and innovative financial projections. Their eventual, somewhat reluctant, approval was a sign, however small, that her vision was gaining traction, that the definition of value within Hart Hotels was beginning to expand beyond the quarterly earnings report. As the applause eventually subsided and the gala shifted back into celebration and networking, Amara stepped away from the stage, seeking a quiet corner near the large windows overlooking the glittering Chicago night. She watched the vibrant interactions, the exchange of ideas, the palpable sense of hope. It wasn't a finish line, she knew that. Systemic change was a marathon, not a sprint. Bias wouldn't vanish overnight. There would be setbacks, resistance, new challenges. The work was never truly done. Just then, her gaze fell upon a small family standing near the ballroom entrance, preparing to leave. A black mother, elegant in a brightly colored dress, was adjusting the bow on her young daughter's hair. The little girl, perhaps 7 or 8 years old, had wide, inquisitive eyes that were fixed intently on Amara across the room. She tugged insistently on her mother's sleeve and whispered, her voice carrying clearly in a momentary lull, "Mommy, is that her? Is she the one who owns this whole giant place? The boss?" The mother looked over at Amara, her face breaking into a broad smile filled with pride and something akin to wonder. "Yes, baby girl," she replied softly, her eyes meeting Amara's across the distance. "That's Dr. Ngozi. She is." Amara held the mother's gaze for a moment, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. Then she looked directly at the little girl whose eyes were now shining, not just with curiosity, but with the dawning light of possibility. In that instant, the immense weight of the constant struggle, the accumulated exhaustion of fighting invisible battles seemed to lift, replaced by a clarity of purpose so profound it brought tears to Amara's eyes, blurring the dazzling lights of the ballroom. Representation, she thought, wasn't the destination. It was the starting point. It was the essential foundation upon which something larger, stronger, and more just could be built. Seeing that little girl's face, seeing the unquestioning acceptance, the spark of inspiration, that was the empire she truly wanted to build. That was the legacy worth fighting for. The road ahead remained long, undoubtedly paved with obstacles. But the blueprint was clear. And tonight, surrounded by the tangible results of her efforts, standing tall in the heart of her own hotel, Amara Ngozi allowed herself a moment of quiet, tearful hope. They were finally building something not just luxurious, but luminous. Something meant to last.